Streaming now, this is the Wood TV Live Desk.
And good afternoon, everyone. Philip Benarski here with the Wood TV Live Desk. Hope you're having a great day so far. Digital reporter Matt Jarowski joins us once again to talk about his latest Sunday story, and this one was a pretty big doozy, and also came in at just the perfect timing. Matt, it is so great to see you once again. The Michigan Wolverines obviously winning their 1,000th game in program history on Saturday over Maryland. Huge accomplishment for sure, but your story actually kind of focused more on a game that took place about 131 years ago. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I mean, the timing of it worked out perfectly. This Saturday was their 1,000th win. This Sunday was the anniversary of win number 34, which a lot of, it's a minor footnote in the history of a very historic program, but a very interesting one nonetheless, because there's a school in Ohio, not Ohio State, that claims that Michigan actually only has 999 program wins, and that's because win 34. So this is Oberlin College. They're a D3 program now. They're still around, still playing football, but very much a small school. They played Michigan on November 19th, 1892. And so it's the very, the very early days of college football. There's so many moving parts to this game, and it really makes for an interesting story. I would encourage everyone to go read it.
Absolutely, and it is available right now over on our website, woodtv.com. Please check it out right now. If you're watching us on Facebook, just go ahead and click that link in the description box or the comment section. You'll be able to head on over right to the story and still be able to listen to Matt talk a little bit more about it. Matt, I absolutely want to encourage everybody to go read this story, but there are a lot of interesting tidbits that would pique somebody's interest. Really, one thing I wanted to talk about that kind of gives you more insight into what the controversy is just talking about the two people that were in charge of keeping track of the score and the time. They obviously had stakes in the game, and it really kind of also showcases where exactly in the history of football in general as the game was even at.
Right, so bear in mind, this is 1892, so this is about 20 years after what's considered the first college football game, which was Princeton and Rutgers. And at that point, we know that it's really nothing like football that we consider today. The very first game, the Princeton-Rutgers game, was more like rugby. There were more than 11 people per side. There were constant scrums. The scoring was completely different. Back then, literally, if you got what we would call a touchdown, you just got a point. That was a score. You got a point. At this point, in 1892, the point system is still different than what we use today. A touchdown is worth 4 points. A quick goal, which we would call a field goal, is worth 2. So there's a lot of very weird moving parts. There's another interesting aspect. So Oberlin is an up-and-coming program at this point. John Heisman, who we all know for the Heisman Trophy, was a first-year coach at Oberlin at this point. Michigan is, at this point, the Ivy League schools on the East Coast have the established traditional programs. They're the big names. Michigan is one of the very few in the western part of the country at that time to have an established program. So Oberlin was 9-0 going into this game under Heisman, looking to cap off an undefeated season against a pretty big name in Michigan. So they're playing this game in Ann Arbor. They set some ground rules ahead of time. Now bear in mind, there's one umpire that is just a backup from the Oberlin team. And there's also like a timekeeper referee that is a Michigan backup. So, okay, we got people on both sides of this. They set a rule ahead of time is, listen, however long the game goes, whatever, the game needs to end by 4:50 in the afternoon because we need time to go catch the last train out of town to get back home. So that is kind of the parameters built around this game. So it's kind of a slog. At some point in the middle of the fourth quarter, there's still plenty of time on the clock game-wise. The game is tied at 22. Oberlin has the ball, and they kick a field goal, take a 24-22 lead, and then the referee from Oberlin says, okay, it's 4:50, the game is over, we win, see you later. The Michigan umpire says, it's actually 4:46, so it's not time yet. But at this point, literally Oberlin ran off the field. They ran and left the field.
Right.
So the Michigan umpire is like, okay. So he lets Michigan take the ball. They march down the field, score a touchdown. They declared themselves a winner, 26-24. So that is win number 34. If you've ever been to Schembechler Hall down in Ann Arbor, they have a little museum in there, which it's closed right now, unfortunately, but it will be open eventually. And they have what they call the Wall of Wins, this giant glass wall filled with all these decorative footballs that kind of commemorate each individual game. And so you can go there. When you can go there, you can see win 34, the ball right there, 26-24. If you go to Oberlin's website, even still today, the history of the program, their records say they won that game 24-22. So is it win number 1,000? Is it win 999? I guess, winners tell the story. So
Right. Yeah. No. It all depends on really who you ask. I think in that one. And
exactly.
And that is kind of the crux of the story, of the controversy surrounding the story. But it's not really. There's so many more elements to this story. I mean, even the rematch that you kind of go into a couple years later between the two teams also had some controversies and some. It's looking back on it now, it is arguably really hilarious that it kind of happened again, almost.
So, it is a very fascinating story. Thank you. This game, or even this problem, is not the primary driver of why we have the NCAA, but it is one example of why the sport needed oversight. So, the NCAA was formed in 1906. This comes off the 1905 season, where at least a dozen players, some counts have more than 20, college football players died because of injuries suffered on the field. There's actually a detailed story from the Harvard-Yale game that year, where a Yale punt returner was fielding a punt, and two Harvard players came down. One player punched him in the nose, and the other one drop kicked him in the chest, and that was their way of tackling him.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the most gentlemanly way to go about things, which is how they explain it. But there were no rules to say you can't punch someone or drop kick them, so it was technically a legal play. So these are the kind of things. Obviously, we need to try and prevent these injuries and fatalities. But it was really, we just need someone to actually come in and oversee this and establish rules and establish protocols and regulate the officiating. So the rematch in 1894, so 2 years later, two teams play again, also in Ann Arbor. The teams get together ahead of time. They say, look, we need an impartial judge. We can't just have referees, our backups, people from our actual teams serving as the officials. So they get the great idea to get Amos Alonzo Stagg to serve as the main referee for the game. Now, that's obviously another big name in college football. At this point, he's the head coach of the University of Chicago, which is one of the founding Big Ten members, and they were a big football powerhouse in their day as well. So Stagg serves as the official. He agrees to serve as the official for this game. Michigan won 14-6, by the way, so to the victor go the spoils there. So they do win the rematch as well. But Stagg officiated that game, and then later that season, Stagg and a couple of players from his team went and watched the Michigan-Cornell game later that season. They scouted the game, which is interesting given the current scandal around the Wolverines. And then Michigan and Chicago played later that year. And Stagg admitted that he knew all of Michigan's plays. He knew what they were going to do. However, Michigan still managed to win once they realized that Stagg had their signals, for lack of a better term. They played against them. They called in a play and ran something against it to score and ultimately win the game. So history repeats itself.
Right. No, I was going to say it is kind of insane that it is once again kind of coming full circle. And you mentioned Staggs, you mentioned John Heisman a little bit earlier, the coach of Oberlin. A lot of big names kind of associated in this two-game stretch that your story really goes very well into detail on. I always ask you this question when you're doing your research and everything, but seeing those big names and being able to kind of write about them and including them in the story, how cool was that?
It's always a struggle because when you're writing something, you try to be succinct without diving into too many details, because then a piece just gets so insanely long, which is a struggle for me as itself. But even just doing the research as you go down the wormholes of learning about John Heisman or learning more about Stagg, these other people. I don't know if I mentioned this in the story, but so the 1892 game, the Michigan player who scored the touchdown to give them the game-winning score for win 34 was George Jewett, who's a Michigan legend in his own right, which you can go read about him online as well. The Michigan Northwestern play for the George Jewett Trophy. So many little inroads, and there's a lot of wormholes you can go down, especially for a college football fan.
Right, absolutely. You end up finding out a bunch of other stories to potentially write about as well. Yeah, definitely. And I was kind of joking around with one of my producers the other day about this story and just how, oh man, it would have been really cool if Michigan had the opportunity to get that 1,000th win against Ohio State coming up this Saturday. But, I mean, I guess depending on which side of the aisle you fall on, they could still potentially have that opportunity.
Sure.
But as far as the record stands, Michigan does have 1,000 wins. And win number 34 was obviously a very, very interesting tale. And we're glad that you kind of took the opportunity to write about it and give us the opportunity to read it. So thank you so much for doing that, Matt. And again, that story is live right now over on our website, woodtv.com. We only scratched the surface on everything in that story, so you definitely are going to want to check that out. Matt, once again, thank you so much for stopping by the live desk. We'll see you next week.
Anytime. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And I want to thank everybody else for tuning into this latest edition of the Wood TV Live Desk. I'm Phil Pinarski, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.